Mr. Cannan, as you've heard, has joined us, the Treasury Minister, to talk in the main about an initiative that was launched by the government, which, going by the response in the public, was very successful. Now, as a household, if you want to save money, you usually cut down on certain spendings. You trim, you adjust. The government, since the VAT bombshells, have been carrying out various exercises to adjust the budget. The latest attracted 1,300 public responses, suggestions, demands in some cases. These have now been scrutinised by the government and assessed. I speak of the initiative called SAVE, which stands for Securing Added Value and Efficiencies. But in two areas, there have been vigorous responses. Let's just go back to when this initiative was actually announced. This was in the budget speech in 2017, and I quote from Mr. Cannan's speech: "I have written into the budget 25 million at that stage of yet unallocated savings that must be found from within departmental budgets. I can inform you, in conjunction with the Cabinet Office, have established a cross-government team chaired by Mr. Shimmons to identify efficiencies and opportunities that may allow us to find the savings required." Well, Mr. Cannan, first of all, 25 million was the figure then. It's now gone down to 15 million.
Yeah, and as I said in the last budget, 15 million was a more appropriate figure, a more realistic figure. Perhaps we'd been over-ambitious by setting out £25 million initially, but also we've been helped by a significant improvement in our overall economic performance. Economic growth has and tax receipts and national insurance receipts have improved significantly, far above what we were expecting. So we were able to readjust this savings figure down to £15 million. But it's absolutely vital that we stay on track in terms of finding these additional funds.
Is this aimed towards our pension overspend? Is that the reason we're trying to get this money?
Absolutely, because we can see there's a hole in government finances in 2021, 2022 when the Pensions Reserve Fund, the Public Sector Pensions Reserve Fund runs out. We are focused on making sure there's a smooth transition for public finances. Clearly, the whole matter of public sector pensions is up for debate in the very, very near future, and that's a side matter, if you like, from this overall scheme that we're talking about today. The SAVE campaign is not only designed to find government efficiencies, but to effectively look at delivering services in a better way and getting better value for the taxpayers' money.
Let's just have a look at something that came up on Sunday Opinion yesterday. The Ironman Law Society, its president Jane Gray, appeared and talked about the Public Defender scheme, which has been put forward. A PDU, Public Defender Unit, would introduce a permanent full-time criminal defence team, primarily for summary court cases and more infrequently for summary court and Court of General Jail delivery hearings and trials, to replace private lawyers. It mentions a figure at the end, 2.3 million, the total payment made to private sector legal practices, including a figure in relation to the proportion of administrative effort. This was the Law Society's response. Jane Gray.
What we have noted, looking at the figures, that in the last 5 years, the actual average cost of the legal aid expenditure was 1.7 million and not 2.3 as stated in the report, and that over the past 5 years, the legal aid expenditure has actually decreased by 804,000, contrary to the remarks made in Tynwald that legal aid was starting to spiral out of control.
So have you got this wrong?
Well, all these projects, including the Public Defender Unit, have been given a thorough assessment before they've been assessed from business case to be taken forward. This particular scheme, the Public Defender Unit, which came out from the ideas that were put to us for savings, is a scheme that's been rolled out across the United States, into the United Kingdom, now into the UK, into Scotland, further afield into Australia. It's a credible scheme.
But it sounds as if you haven't spoken to the Law Society about this.
Well, John, just hang on a second. It's a credible scheme. We've done the research behind it, and if everybody reads the report carefully, the next stage is for the Attorney General to draw up a detailed business case, and with it the possible legislation to accompany it, to seek the approval of the Legal Aid Committee, and as part of a consultation process to discuss matters with the Law Society. So this particular idea, this particular scheme, which will save potentially £1 million for the taxpayer, and also deliver, we think, potentially a better legal aid system, which provides more accountability and more transparency around the public expenditure in this particular case, is at a stage where there will be all this consultation and the relevant legislation drawn up. The key point here, of course, is that it's not a surprise to see kicking and screaming coming from the Law Society, even at this early stage, because potentially there's £2.3 million, as we identified, which have been spent in 2015-16, and 25 lawyers who will not be in receipt of
But
that
wouldn't it be
money.
better if you talk to them first before actually
No.
publicising it?
Well, the key point here, John, is that we set out to find government savings of £15 million. It's absolutely vital that we do that. We took 1,300 ideas. A lot of those ideas have gone out to departments because they just simply weren't big enough. The big ideas that had legs, that were credible, have been put forward. This is credible. It's got £1 million worth of savings attached to it. It's a scheme that's been rolled out in the United Kingdom and rolled out in further afield, as I've already pointed out. And on that basis, it's been assessed as being right and proper that we take this forward to the next stage. And people will get the chance to input into the consultation that will invariably accompany any change to legislation that is required in this particular case. And this will be done once the Attorney General has had a proper chance to formulate all the operational criteria that would accompany this.
Can we just go on to the bus services? Because it says the externalisation of the bus services, it's likely there are cost reductions made by prioritising routes. The report indicates the success of delivery is compromised by the rationale for the provision of some routes being politically driven rather than by way of evidence based on need. It ever was, wasn't it, with bus routes? There's some routes which are important, although not a lot of people use them. They are important that there are bus routes, and that's always going to be so, isn't it?
Absolutely. But what this report talks about is asking the Department of Infrastructure, rather than to treat the trams, the trains and the buses in isolation, to put all three together into a consolidated plan for transport for the next 3 years, to reflect the requirement to find £1 million in savings. And by bringing them together, bringing it into a consolidated plan, we think there are efficiencies to be found, that it will actually lead to a more thought-out process for island transport. We'll be able to find any areas of overlap, and ultimately we'll end up with the appropriate island transport system, or a better island transport system, which is again providing better value for money for the taxpayer.
You point out that the bus people have already brought in various measures, various moves. They're moving along the right track, if I can put it that way, if I can pun. Obviously, if you're bringing in more moves, probably they're jumping up and down and saying, hang about, this is going too far. Well,
again, we've already seen the screaming and shouting coming from Eric Holmes last week. The point is, and what Eric Holmes clearly forgets to discuss, is that all these measures are actually being brought in because primarily we are seeking to find savings so that we can account for and pay for the promises made via the public sector pensions.
He uses the phrase, this strike against the island's workforce, coming on the centenary month of the Great Manx General Strike of July 1919. He's obviously very annoyed about this.
Well, so far, nobody's actually produced any plans for Eric to get annoyed about, other than the fact that we have clearly identified there's better ways to do things. The better doing things in a better, more efficient, more streamlined way are only going to be of benefit to Eric Holmes, the taxpayer, and the workforce. So it's right and proper that we actually get behind these things and look for and ask the department to produce better results than the results that are being produced at the moment, because public transport is costing us millions and millions of pounds in effectively taxpayer subsidies. We should be looking for better ways to do these things.
Can I ask you one last question? What are the consequences of not getting this £15 million target?
Well, that depends very much on where we end up with our economic growth forecasts.
You talked to the black hole, didn't you? The black hole, pensions black hole.
What I think the key point here is, John, is that we are on top of our budget. We're on top of our projections. If there's slippage and if we're falling behind, then you can expect me and the Treasury to react appropriately in the forthcoming budget. So I'm not about to rush into making any rash statements, but we do need to find this money. Everybody's aware that we need to find this money. And so far, our budgetary plans, the way we're doing things, I think are proving successful. More money in an income tax, more people in employment, opportunities at the moment for business to come to the island. And we've made a number of fairly significant moves to ensure that people have more money in their pockets through, for example, reducing the electricity debt. So we're taking very positive action. We're taking positive action. At the same time as taking all those positive steps and spending money, we also have to counterbalance that and find money and efficiencies to ensure we have a balanced budget.
Treasury Minister, thank you very much. Obviously.